This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. Common myth around mindset work or mental toughness is that you're judged as either mentally tough or mentally weak. And I'm here to tell you that is a load of rubbish. I want to destroy that myth. Because when the term mentally weak is used, it's a big put down and it can really deeply affect some people. And certainly from the mental toughness model that I use a lot in my work, which has been heavily researched globally across sport, business and health settings by Professor Peter Clough and his colleagues, they state that every person finds themselves on a continuum with mental sensitivity at the lower end and mental toughness at the top end. And with experience and with coaching or psychological support, people who measure at the low end of the scale can change their behaviors, they can develop to become more mentally tough. And likewise, the people who are in the middle of the continuum, they can also develop and learn different tools so that they end up higher up on the mental toughness continuum. And when we do so, we then go on to make smarter decisions which influence, yes, our mental toughness, but also our performance in the workplace or in sport and our well-being. And in this episode, I'm joined by three guests again, John Fletcher, Natalie Henderson, and James Maurice. And we're going to be looking at how you can develop different parts of mental toughness with young people so that they can go on to thrive, so that they can overcome obstacles and challenges more confidently, and they can play sport or live their life more fiercely, as John talks about now. So I know in the past, Fletch, you've been involved in youth rugby at lower levels up to the higher elite level in the England pathway. So the thing I see quite a lot is some players can be blinded by fear. They're afraid to ask for the ball, to express themselves. Like, from your experience, where does that come from?
I mean, in my experience, my views would be based on past experiences. So either it's happened to them or happened to something else, that they've done something and it hasn't, in their view of the world is like it hasn't gone well. They've sort of had a negative response that's either been by their fellow teammates, possibly parents, possibly coaches, possibly spectators, possibly a combination of all of that type stuff. So kind of lump that up into the environment. So actually the environment is not helping the player sort of feel comfortable with, like, this is just normal. Not everything's going to go well. There's some stuff that's not going to go well. It's a really important part of learning. So yeah, that's sort of my experience. Generally it would often be like a combination of that type of stuff, but I do feel as though that the coach has a responsibility to sort of say, look, this is how it is around here. This is the stuff we value, what's important, how we're going to behave around this sort of stuff. So yeah, that's my view on the world.
Yeah, it was always going to be a complex answer, wasn't it? Because then you throw into the mix, I suppose, as well, they're different people's personalities. Some are more like risk takers, aren't they? And some are more confident and are naturally confident in their abilities, some aren't. So as a coach, how do you help break down some of these barriers?
I think you kind of hit the nail on it a little bit there. So is this sort of, where does this come from? What sort of personality does this person have? I think the key is to kind of get to know them a bit, or get to know them really well. Like, what sort of stuff motivates them? Why do they play? What's important to them? What stuff do they value? And then possibly need to reset their thinking a little bit type stuff. And that comes within culture is quite a big word, but just kind of like, well, this is what's important to us. And certainly that would be high value in any environment that I would want. I would want people to express themselves. I would predominantly want people sort of like playing to their strengths, be really positive with each other, understanding actually like often stuff's not going to go well, or sometimes stuff's not going to go well, and it's always about how we respond to it, how do we learn from it, because they're real big learning opportunities. Clearly sort of linked training a bit to the game. So is this a training thing? Is it a game thing? Am I behaving differently on game day? What I've noticed around sport is that actually the vast majority of people are trying really hard around their training, how they're designing stuff, how skillful they are, the environment they're creating. And then unfortunately, they're actually shifting that a little bit around the actual game day. And that's quite confusing for players, because you've got these grown-ups who are behaving in a certain way around training and behaving differently around the game. And so I'd probably certainly around the game stuff, I think we can do more. I think we can try and sort of link our training to the game, and just the game's part of their experiences type stuff. It's just, it's just part of it.
Massively interesting, that one, because I see that a lot, where players will come to me basically because they are training quite well, but then they're not taking it into games. So I suppose in games, there can be such a big onus on the result, on the performance. Do you have to, as a coach, just change the way you communicate in order to help them free themselves up?
Yeah, again, look, and often as coaches or grown-up parents, and we're sort of saying one thing and then we're behaving in a different way, or we're verbally communicating in a certain way and then we're non-verbally communicating in another way. So if you shaking your head but you're still saying some positive stuff to the kids, then they're not daft. They're sort of, there's something not right here. Personally, I'd have a very similar attitude to training and the game, no matter what level, and that would include the performance level. But certainly, there would be some stuff that we would just agree as a group, like this is how we're going to roll, and this is how people are going to behave, and this is important. And actually, the possible frustrations and the challenging around behaviour would just be around that stuff. I wouldn't then be inconsistent with it. So even when we were doing England under 18 stuff, we would reward people trying stuff and being creative, and sometimes it didn't go well. That's just part of the journey. But often it would. And, the human's a great thing that we're really good at getting ourselves out of trouble type stuff. We're very adaptable. So we will eventually kind of get it. And I guess that's our role as well, isn't it? Is to sort of look to guide them and support them through that.
Yeah, massively, because let's face it, in any sport, there's probably more downs than there is ups, really. So they need that support.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's but again, especially when they're younger, just sort of rephrase what a down is. People conceding stuff or missing stuff or not being able to perform a skill, to me is not a down. If I get excited about that stuff, I think that's a real opportunity to accelerate learning type stuff. I would actively be planning that into the session, sort of planning stuff not going well, because it's going to afford them, and in games as well. I'm definitely not the coach that sort of prevents poor things from happening. I actually want that stuff to happen. So if it was football, I wouldn't tell my team where a possible attacker or how he's going, the guy might score. Well, I just think that's a great opportunity for the players to learn a bit. That possibly would shift a little bit, if you get closer to the performance end and they get closer to them being adults, I guess.
One thing you mentioned before about trying to play to their strengths as well. In some sports, some coaches can go on and on about trying to improve the weaknesses. Is your approach, your philosophy a bit different there?
It would be. Look, I think we're probably saying the same things. I would just afford them or allow them more opportunities to sort of to play to their strengths, especially early on, where that's where they're going to go to. That's stuff they're good at. They're getting good affirmation. They're getting a lot of positive reinforcement. They're getting a lot of joy. I don't think we should be taking that stuff away. To me, it's in hand. Well, that's great, and you've had an opportunity to do it. What about this challenge? What about actually seeing if you can score in a different way, or see if you can behave in a different way? So I wouldn't be taking stuff away from people. I would be adding to it. Just obviously some fairly normal coaching stuff. But definitely around the performance end. So when they get a little bit older. So I love the Paul Collingwood story. He's played for England a number of times, captain his country, won World Cups, and he fundamentally had about 4 shots. So, however, he was afforded an opportunity to explore and try stuff, and then he got into this performance arena and goes, well, I'm actually going to remove some stuff, and I'm going to really focus around my strengths. So if the ball's here, I'm going to whack it there. If it's there, I'm probably going to leave it. And actually, I can't really play that shot. I'm sure in the background he's working harder to become more adaptable and more skillful, but once he got in that performance arena, he kind of understood his game a bit. I think our job within the community in the youth game is to try and make people as skillful as possible, so they just have more options.
That makes sense. And when it comes down to parents and their influence over youngsters, what sort of advice would you offer a parent?
Look, I think it's key we work together. I mean, often they're kind of shut off a little bit. The parents feel it. The coach has actually been quite deliberate about it, that type of stuff. I mean, I was once removed from a sports hall when my kid was 7. Sort of, look, this isn't parent space. And I felt like saying, look, with all due respect, you have them for like 40 minutes, I have them for the rest of the time. We might want to, we might want to share some stuff so I can look to support what you guys were talking about. So I think it's important that we're together. Clearly just want to put the players in the middle of it a bit and look, and how can we sort of look to support them. I think it's important that the kid feels loved and valued. I think it's important that parents understand actually what they want to get out of it. It'll be heavily influenced by you as parents when they're younger, but it'll change when they go through maturation and they kind of are developing their own sort of thoughts and beliefs and values and all that sort of stuff. And I think you can clearly have some debate about it. Ultimately, you're there to support them. Our job as adults with children's job as parents, as I see it, is to sort of, is to support them being independent. So that would be it. Obviously, the younger you are, probably more high support. Possibly change that a little bit around, possibly a bit more sort of challenge around stuff that's important to either the team they're playing for. I mean, what we have as a family is we just have some stuff that we talk about, stuff that's important to us as a family. So like effort and trying hard and trying stuff. So, we're definitely having conversations with our kids based around the stuff that we value as a family and that they value within that.
One of the big things that I took away from this chat with John was that he emphasised the word learning many times and seeking learning opportunities from all kinds of different situations. And in sport, it's so easy to get transfixed on the outcome, on results, and then let your emotions take over so that your confidence is flattened or it fluctuates wildly. And for the highly motivated or committed person out there, what they tend to do is simply work harder and seek to prove themselves to other people and to themselves. But by doing that, having that approach, it's very, very easy to simply go around in circles and then keep on making the same mistakes time and time again. In the business world, I also see it a lot when working with experienced executives or successful entrepreneurial people. Again, they're highly ambitious, they're very results driven, but there's a difference sometimes. In the workplace, they often have people in their leadership teams or people that they can turn to, that they can have conversations with or delegate things to. So then when there is a problem or a challenge, they find the learning collectively. So it can be easier in a business setting. Whereas in sport, often people don't have that support system around them and they just get blinkered in their thinking. So they get lost. And I think, that's where psychologists, where coaches can really, really help people. We can help them understand themselves better, their motivations for playing the sport and doing what they do, their values. And as John mentioned, understanding value clashes and what is your favorable environment is so, so important. So we can really help them to step back and see things from a different angle so that they can then go on to help themselves and then obviously perform better. And if you go on to listen to the full episode that I recorded with John, it's episode 39, you'll also see that we talk about results and how you should go about discussing it as a parent or a coach. Now you're going to hear from Natalie Henderson, who again mentions the word learning a number of times. and really highlights how different experiences do go on to build character and mental toughness. The relationship between you and the players, like, really, really important. And I suppose treating them as an individual would be important. But at the same time, I can imagine that can be quite tough at times in your role when you've got a squad of, 20 odd players.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the key things for me is knowing the individual. That is absolutely paramount. And I think one of my favourite quotes is, players don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that for me epitomises me and my philosophy, really. And I think they are individuals. People are different. We're all different. We all have different motivations. We're all inspired in different ways. That is it. We are human beings and we're all different. So I think knowing the individual is absolutely key. And then in terms of how you deal with that in football, with it being a team sport, the academy is very much around individuals in terms of who are we trying to get into that first team. We're not producing squads, we're producing individuals. But yeah, I think it's difficult. If you've got 20 players and you want to know each individual the best you can, it's being very tactical in how you go about that. And I think, that would be the thing, is you have to kind of be meticulous with it, really. I often, when I'm driving into sessions, will think about who I've maybe spent more time with this week, who haven't I been able to speak to, who am I going to make sure when I'm setting up on the pitch that I purposely go and have a little chat with, and being strategic about those relationships, really. They would be some key things.
I can imagine, because there'll be times where, I don't know, if you use a harsher tone potentially with someone and it could be perceived in the wrong way. They might have had might be having a difficult period at home or something like that. Can go on to impact them going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where it's key to know them, really. Some players need an arm around their shoulder. Other players, need a stern word, and you get more out of them that way. If one of them's had a bad day at school, it's pretty important we know that before we start shouting at them in training, because we don't want to tip them over the edge. So I think knowing things like that in terms of what their frame of mind is at that moment before that session is important. But I also think the personal bit's important, asking them how their family is, asking them how their brothers and sisters are doing, who's their favourite teacher at school. All those personal questions really are the ones that I try to tap into, really, because I think that's how, it goes a long way, doesn't it? If people really care about you as a person and they know about your family and they ask about your family. And so, yeah, I think the personal questions as well are just as important as the football questions, really.
Yeah, I'd agree, because, straight away they're going to feel valued, aren't they? And, when you talk about respect earlier, you've got their instant respect, I would have thought.
Yeah, I would hope so anyway, yeah.
So let's talk about some challenges that you've had in your coaching and how you've overcome them. Have you got a few that spring to mind?
People always, this is always a main question, really. I think for me, obviously there is big things that stand out. The ACL injury was a challenge in my football career. In coaching, I was always the only woman on a football course, or, my level 1, the only woman. Level 2, maybe there's me and one other woman, and then 28 men. So I think they could be like standout challenges that I've always faced. But for me, challenges come every day, and there might not be big ones, but there might be small ones. So I think in terms of challenges, yes, there's probably loads that I have to deal with, but a lot of them come on a daily basis. And small challenges, by that I could mean difficult conversations with staff or with players. Releasing players is obviously a big part of my job. So sitting with parents and players, telling them, they're not going to be a footballer for Newcastle United anymore they're tough challenges, really. So there is some standout ones in terms of ACL, being the only woman, etc., etc. But for me, it's the small challenges that we overcome every day that I feel are probably more important and probably build character as well.
There's two things that stand out there to me, where you talk about, I suppose being the only female on courses and different things like that. I would imagine to some people that could be quite hard, because they might compare themselves against other people, and you see it a lot in, like, with young players, don't you, where they compare themselves to teammates and worry a lot about other people's thoughts. I'm guessing from the way you're talking, you're quite single-minded in some ways and don't let it worry you.
I think people probably do think that. I mean, I'm a big worrier, and people don't think this, and people think I'm really like confident and outgoing and it's all going smooth. And but I'm a big worrier and I'm a huge overthinker. So when I do enter a room and realize I'm the only woman, it doesn't bother me a great amount, because like I said before, it's all I've ever known. It's normal to me. But I think I do worry about things at times. I think challenges they come every day, really, and I think that's what builds character, really.
Touching on the other thing you mentioned about releasing players, how hard is that as a coach? Yeah,
that is the toughest part of the job, really. And I think any coach would say that, it's not nice. You've got players that are dreaming of being footballers and you're sitting there telling them it's not going to happen, or certainly not yet anyway. That would be the key thing. But yeah, so that's a really difficult part. But there's loads of challenges in terms of that's obviously a difficult part, a hard part. For me, I always find that really hard because, like I said before, my philosophy and the way I am, I like to know the player. I like to have a good relationship with the player. I like to be liked. That would be a key thing. People say, I'm not bothered what people think. Like, I am. I would like somebody to like me. I think that's only human. So to then sit there after having a great relationship with that player, to then, breaking his heart ultimately is the hardest bit of the job, but it has to be done. And that's elite football, really. We have to make decisions. We're paid to make decisions. And, that's the football world.
What message would you give to any listeners who've got any children who have been released? So, like, what message would you give to the children if you are released from an academy?
Yeah, I think for me, the big challenges that I always think, and the things that I try to say, is that it's not necessarily the end of the road for them. Football is a matter of opinion at times, and just because one club doesn't maybe see your potential doesn't mean another club won't. I always say to the players, if they do get released or if they're on trial and we haven't registered them, that, it's not the end of the road. Go away, work really hard, keep believing in yourself, keep maximising that potential and doing everything you can to be a footballer, because a lot of kids want to be footballers, but they don't understand the work that they have to put in to be one, and keep going with it, really. So I think it's one of those that I always urge them, don't throw the towel in. It's not the end of your dream. That would be the one thing. We're not saying you're never going to be a footballer. We're just saying right now the time is not right, and you're not at the level that you maybe should be at, but go away, work hard, and the dream could become a reality one day.
Yeah, and that is the reality as well, isn't it? That like nobody's journey is exactly the same. To get into football, you could be released at 8, 9 years old, then come back into it 2 or 3 years later, or you could be released at 14, then come back into it. It's just hugely different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key thing. There's loads of there's good examples of it in terms of, players in the Premier League that were released from clubs at an early age and they went to another club, and everybody has a different journey, and that links to the human element before. We're all different. We all have different journeys. And just because your journey is different to somebody else's doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to make it as a footballer. Just every journey is different.
Yeah, and the key really is, if you are released, is like how you come to bounce back and display that resilience ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think resilience is a massive thing. And I think setbacks build character and build resilience and build that mental toughness. And although they're horrible at the time, I've had them myself, they're uncomfortable. I said at the very start, it's not until you look back that the dots seem to join together and you're like, oh yeah, that might be why that happened. But yeah, I think embrace setbacks as much as you possibly can, learn as much as you possibly can for them, and use them moving forward, really.
I'm pleased to announce a new sponsor for the show, Chimera Sport, who produce a range of sportswear and equipment to enhance performance and recovery, reducing injury occurrences, you'll find on the product section of our website, www.sport-excellence.co.uk/products, access to our own Chimera Sports Shop. I've personally tested some of the garments, and you'll find that the infrared sportswear has been clinically tested too, so it's great for fitness enthusiasts and athletes who want to push harder, go further, and recover quicker. I like the way Natalie talked about treating footballers as people, as humans, not players. It's so essential for any coach to be able to get the best from them. It helps build trust, mutual respect, and naturally a positive relationship, which feeds me nicely into the topic of psychological safety, where in a team environment, players are encouraged to take risks, to play fearlessly, and it goes on to nurture mutual trust, support, and respect that are talked about. In this type of environment, parents, players, coaches are all encouraged to voice their opinions in different ways. I accept that this can be very difficult in some settings, especially in high-performance settings, but what it does is foster improved self-awareness if the correct processes are in place. And from a mental toughness standpoint, I'll give you some ideas on the types of things that people may be thinking, but often won't go on to disclose. When we think about emotional control, they may know that they struggle to manage their emotions when they're under pressure. They might know that they find themselves easily provoked, yet in a psychologically unsafe environment, they would hold on to these feelings and thoughts, perhaps because if they do open their mouths, they'll feel shamed or embarrassed, criticised, which can then go on to damage their confidence or their self-worth. And it might mean that they don't go on there to fully express themselves on the pitch, on the course, or the court, and in the sport. Now we'll consider confidence as well. It might be that that type of player or athlete recognises for a certain skill they aren't particularly confident or competent, but they don't want to voice that to a coach in case they look, in inverted commas, weak. That's what they potentially may be thinking, because it might go on to affect their selection for a team. Yet, because they aren't open, the player doesn't improve. The coach sometimes isn't able to act and to help them to develop the particular skill which they feel weak in. I hate that word weak. Let's say that they need to improve upon. And these are just two examples from the mental toughness framework of the importance of psychological safety. So I'd encourage you to Google this term, or you might want to check out a recent blog that I've just published. The details are in the show notes. You may also recognise that in this next segment, with psychological safety, young footballers will be much better placed to deal with some of the challenges that James Maurice goes on to talk about. So would you like to tell the listeners about what you see are the typical challenges for young academy footballers?
Yeah, definitely. I think academy football, as you know, I think you've worked within it as well, and with some players within academy football, and I think it brings it that there's so many challenges that come about, and so many typical challenges. I think throughout my time within academy football, I've worked and supported children from the age of 8 years old to teenagers of 15, 16, up to the age of 20 young adults going into 20 and above. So it's a broad age range that includes many different challenges at different points in time. And I think you could look at maybe the generic and typical challenges that all will probably experience, and that can range from pressure of performing at the weekend because you're coming up to a period where decisions are being made potentially regarding contracts. It might be your local rivals. You might have parents who might be putting unintended pressure on you, etc. But it also might be the challenges of overcoming injuries that many footballers experience during their academy journey, being deselected, and just, I guess, probably just the daily challenge of trying to develop your craft as a footballer. That's challenging enough for many. And I think you could probably break it down into age groups in terms of some of the typical challenges that you might kind of see within academy football. So I'm sure many of your listeners know about academy football, but for those that don't, it's breaking down into different phases. So if we look at the foundation phase, for example, which is under 9s to under 12s, that's when players first come into academy football from grassroots. And that challenge for them would probably be, well, at grassroots, they're the star player. You know, they've played every minute of every game. But now they're in an environment where, you know, at times that isn't going to be the case. And that can be really hard for an 8 or 9-year-old child to try and comprehend and rationalize and understand. So we know that, you know, the thinking part of the brain doesn't get developed, and therefore helping and supporting and educating, you know, not just players, but also parents through that stage, you know, is critical. And I guess as you move through the ages, within those ages, you look at under 11s, there's also the challenges of, you know, that's the age where they're moving from primary school to secondary school. So, you know, they've got different challenges going on outside of football as well. You know, they're making new friends, they're trying to settle into new environments. You know, they're moving from, as we well know, moving from childhood into early adolescence, where, you know, they'll start going through puberty, growth-related challenges, all sorts of things that I think sometimes when you look at it from the outside, you don't really kind of comprehend, you don't really realise. So you can look at growth-related stuff. You've got one child who's moving freely and, you know, very agile and quick 1 week, and 2 or 3 weeks down the line might have had a sudden growth spurt and suddenly is like Bambi on ice. And for them, it's really difficult to understand and can be a challenge in itself. And I guess then you move through the ages. We talked about it just as we were starting up here about, you know, that youth development phase where kids, you know, that's from the age of 13s to under 16s. And, you know, the challenges, you know, there's challenges in football as we've talked about, but again, there's school, there's relationships with peers, there's, you know, there's girlfriends and boyfriends that might come on the line and might become apparent. And then you're also trying to become independent as a young adult, and you know, you try and move away from your parents, and all that can be a real challenge. And then you get to the under 16 age group where, you know, you can be offered a scholarship, so that 2-year scholarship, or you might be released from an academy. And I think from experience, that transition, that move from under 16 to 18, alongside the first year of that scholarship, is probably one of the most challenging experiences that if a child was to get that far, that academy footballers can experience.
That's fascinating. Can we, I suppose, rewind a little bit then and consider the various different age groups there? You talked about the 9s to the 12s. I suppose, how do you best support these players? Is it through one-to-one work? Is it workshops? Is it more so with the parents and coaches? How does it generally work?
Yeah, probably the latter. I think we've all had the experience of sports psychs, maybe early sports psychs, of we feel like we should be helping everybody. So we try and do one-to-ones with everybody we can who comes in, who we come into contact with and seeks our support. But actually, when it comes to working with 9, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, I find it that actually probably the better work's probably done through parents and coaches. So that's trying to understand what's going on within that child's life at that particular moment in time and getting the perspectives of everyone that you possibly can do. At Sunderland as well, we also did provide group workshops for those of 9 to 12, and some do and some don't agree with it. I do, because I made it part of my philosophy around working, putting sessions like that on for the younger age groups was all about fun. It's all about making sports psychology fun and engaging, and something that they really want to look at developing and learning. So by all means, we weren't looking at, inverted U theory or theories of arousal within those age groups. But what we were doing was making it applicable to their age, making it fun and engaging, using games to try and bring those kind of concepts to life. Just to not necessarily give them the basic skills, but just to give them a basic understanding of what it is that's important in terms of those psychological characteristics. So yeah, more so working through parents and coaches, but at those young age groups at Sunderland specifically, there was group workshops that, as I mentioned, we tried to make as fun and as enjoyable as possible.
Yeah, and surely at that young age, and even through from the next age group, the 13 to 16s, fun's got to be the key thing if you're going to engage with them. Definitely. And I remember I've got a vivid kind of memory of my first week or my first couple of weeks at Sunderland. I remember, because we used to do this thing called day release, which is where all the kids come in for, kids of different age groups come in for the whole day, and they'll do a variety of different activities. It might be they'll have their coaching, their football coaching, obviously. They might do a little bit of education. They might do a little bit of gym work. And then there's also psychology that was involved in that as well. And I remember the first couple of weeks I went in and they were like, all right, you got psychology with James now.
the faces would draw, like it was like the worst thing ever. Like, oh, really? And then I realised that, right, this is something I've got to try and grab it and try and change this kind of thought process around what sports psychology is and the importance of it. And then you fast forward 3 years, and I remember going down into the barn at Sunderland and, you know, getting ready to take them up to the classroom or doing some sessions outside, and it completely changed. The coach would go, right, you've got Jim with whoever, and it'd be like and the others be like, right, you half have got James, and be like, yes. And I'd be like, okay, that's brilliant. They might not take anything from these sessions, but they're seeing psychology as something that's important. And I've changed that perception of actually it's something that, oh God, it's something we've got to do, to actually something that they kind of want to do. So definitely, for sure, that idea of fun and engagement ran through all my sessions, even up to 18s, etc.
That's fantastic. That because like you say, people just hear the word psychology and then straight away they do have that perception. Certainly, the older people, children are a little bit more open-minded, I suppose. Yeah,
and I think that's it. I think it's just about, because I know from working with some older adolescent teenagers, 18, 19, who'd had psych experience, not necessarily at Sunderland, but wherever they were, whatever club I've been in, that they've had just, I guess, boring experiences, stuff that hasn't engaged them, and they don't see the value of it because it's not something that they're really engaged in. So for me, if we can try and get that and start that early, we're actually getting, not just realising the importance, but understanding it isn't just sitting down and being told about certain emotions or whatever, but it's about fun. It can be engaging, it can be fun. And you know what? I can take something from it and I can put that into my football, and relating it to football as well is really important for me. Like, how can we really relate that to what's going on the pitch at a weekend? And we found that really useful.
James touched on fun there. That's right, fun. It's not a word that you necessarily associate with mental toughness, nor psychology. But with children, it's essential, and with adults, to be fair. The power of words, the power of experiences can really shape people's perceptions and have a big impact on what we do, our motivation, our energy levels. And a third key takeaway that I want to get out from this episode, in addition to the fact that experiences shape mental toughness and support can also have an impact. Yes, fun, support, fun experiences. This goes on to shape our brain and create positive emotions, especially in the face of difficulties. It can release helpful chemicals in our body and in our brain, and that can help free us up. So we go on to learn in different ways and better ways, and we experience events in completely with a different perspective. And if changing the way you see challenges, setbacks, or difficulties is important to you, so that you go on to achieve your goals without being overly distracted, you could really benefit from my online accelerator course. You'll have the opportunity to learn more about yourself, your support system, the positives and the not so good things, and really take the bull by the horns. All of this in 60 minutes. That's right, it's a very short course set up to help you achieve your goals faster, and has a range of exercises and tools that can really assist you so that you can play your chosen sport fearlessly and really help give you a nudge forward if you're feeling a little bit lost or stuck. So go on, please check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and have a look under products. You'll see their online course. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sport psychology resources. The Sport-Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.